The stars looked cold and distant through the viewing port of the Zephyrian monitoring station. Commander Vexthal pressed his four-fingered hand against the smooth metal surface and watched the small blue planet that the humans called Earth. For 3 years now, he had been studying these strange creatures who had somehow managed to spread across their solar system in just a few decades. Vexthal walked back to his command chair, his long legs carrying him across the bridge with fluid grace. The Zephyrians were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and large black eyes that could see far into the darkness of space. They had been watching civilizations rise and fall for thousands of years, and they knew the patterns well. Young species always made the same mistakes. They expanded too quickly, fought among themselves, and left themselves open to conquest. The humans seemed to be following the same path. Vexthal's sensors showed human ships moving between their planets like busy insects. They had colonies on Mars, mining stations in the asteroid belt, and research outposts on the moons of Jupiter. Their movement patterns seemed random and uncoordinated, perfect for what was coming. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force vessel Titan's Edge, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the star charts displayed on the main screen. Jake was a tall man with graying hair and steady brown eyes. He had been in the military for 20 years, and he had learned to be patient when patience was needed. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the alien station," reported Lieutenant Amy Carter from her position at the communications console. Amy was young, maybe 25, with short red hair and quick fingers that never stopped moving across her controls. She had been tracking the alien signals for months now, learning their patterns and frequencies. Jake nodded slowly. "What are they saying this time?" Amy's fingers danced across her keyboard as she decoded the alien message. "Same as always, sir. They're reporting our ship movements to their home fleet. They think we don't know they're watching us." A small smile crossed Jake's face. The aliens had been so careful to hide their monitoring station at the edge of the solar system. They used advanced stealth technology and thought their position was secret. What they didn't know was that human scientists had detected them on the first day they arrived. Since then, every human ship movement, every military exercise, every piece of information the aliens gathered had been carefully planned. Dr. Kevin Park worked quietly in his laboratory aboard the research station. New Horizon. Kevin was a thin man with thick glasses who had spent his whole life studying alien species. Now he was studying the Zephyrians, learning everything he could about their behavior, their technology, and their weaknesses. The aliens were smart, but they were also predictable. They followed the same patterns they had used to study hundreds of other species. They watched for 3 years, gathered data, and then made their recommendations to the military. Kevin had read the translated reports. The Zephyrians thought humans were disorganized, technologically inferior, and militarily weak. They had no idea what was really happening. On Luna Base, Admiral Lisa Brooks sat in her office reading the LATEST intelligence reports. Lisa was a tough woman in her 50s who had worked her way up through the ranks of the Space Force. She had short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. The reports on her desk painted a picture of alien arrogance and human deception. The Zephyrians had been mapping human space for 3 years. They knew the location of every major colony, every military base, every shipping route. They had calculated the strength of the human fleet and found it lacking. Their reports suggested that humanity could be conquered with minimal effort. Lisa smiled grimly. The aliens had seen exactly what humanity wanted them to see. Back on the alien monitoring station, Science Officer Kethmore was preparing his daily report. Kethmore was younger than his commander, with bright green markings on his blue skin that showed his excitement. He loved discovering new things about the humans, and today he had found something particularly interesting. "Commander," Kethmore said, his voice carrying the musical tone common to his species, "the humans have established another mining operation in the asteroid belt. The placement seems random and their security is minimal. One count, only 2 patrol ships in the entire sector." Vexthal nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. This confirms our assessment. The humans spread themselves too thin. They cannot defend all their assets simultaneously. He paused, studying the data on his screen. What about their military exercises? Still following predictable patterns, sir. Their fleet movements are slow and obvious. They announce their exercises weeks in advance and follow standard defensive formations. No creativity, no deception. They fight like they did centuries ago. What Kethmer didn't know was that Colonel Ryan Hughes was watching him from a hidden observation post on Ceres Station. Ryan was a quiet man with dark hair and patient eyes who specialized in military intelligence. He had been coordinating the deception for 2 years now, making sure that every piece of information the aliens gathered supported the illusion of human weakness. The mining operation that had excited Kethmer so much was actually a weapons platform disguised as civilian infrastructure. The 2 patrol ships were decoys with minimal armament, while the real defenses were hidden in the asteroids themselves. The military exercises were carefully staged performances, designed to make human tactics look outdated and predictable. Communications Specialist Emma Davis worked her shift in the deep space monitoring station hidden on the dark side of the moon. Emma was a small woman with brown hair and intense green eyes who could hear signals that others missed. She had been listening to alien communications for so long that she could almost predict what they would say next. The latest transmission made her smile. The aliens were becoming more confident every day. Their reports to the home fleet were getting bolder, their assessments more dismissive. They talked about human technology as if it were primitive, about human military strategy as if it were childish. They had no idea that human scientists had been studying their technology for 3 years, that human engineers had been building weapons specifically designed to counter Zephyrian defenses. Chief Engineer Danny Martinez supervised the construction of what appeared to be a simple trading outpost on Europa. Danny was a stocky man with calloused hands and a practical mind who could build anything given enough time and materials. The outpost looked innocent enough from the outside. Just another human facility in the busy solar system. But inside the structure, Danny's team was installing some of the most advanced weapons ever created. Particle beam cannons, quantum torpedoes, and shield generators that could protect the entire moon. Similar installations were being built throughout the solar system, each one disguised as something harmless and ordinary. Captain Nicole Foster led her patrol ship along the Jupiter-Saturn shipping lane, following the same route she had taken for months. Nicole was a steady woman with blonde hair and blue eyes who never showed emotion, even when she was playing a dangerous game. Her ship looked like a standard patrol vessel, armed with basic weapons and crewed by ordinary sailors. The aliens watching her had no idea that Nicole was one of the most skilled combat pilots in the fleet, or that her ship was equipped with experimental weapons that could destroy a Zephyrian cruiser in seconds. She flew her patrol route with careful precision, making sure to appear routine and predictable while actually gathering intelligence on alien movements. As the months passed, the deception continued. Human ships moved in patterns that appeared random but were actually carefully coordinated. Military bases looked weak but were actually fortified strongholds. Colonies seemed vulnerable but were actually armed camps. The aliens saw what they expected to see, and they prepared for what they thought would be an easy conquest. The trap was almost ready. Soon the Zephyrians would make their move and humanity would be waiting for them. The Zephyrian science vessel, Harmony of Purpose, moved silently through the asteroid belt like a ghost ship. Its hull was black as space itself, and its engines made no sound as they pushed the ship forward. Science Officer Kethmer stood at his observation post, recording everything he saw through the ship's powerful sensors. The human mining platforms scattered throughout the asteroid belt looked exactly like what they were supposed to be. Simple structures with basic equipment, pulling minerals from the floating rocks. Kethmer watched human workers moving between the platforms in small shuttles, their movements slow and inefficient. The security was laughable. Only a few patrol ships covered the entire area, and they followed the same predictable routes every day. "Look at this," Kethmar said to his assistant, pointing at his screen. The humans have placed their mining platforms without any strategic planning. They simply went to the richest asteroids and started digging. No thought about defense, no consideration for supply lines. They are like children playing with expensive toys. What Kethmar didn't know was that every mining platform he was watching had been carefully positioned by human military planners. The platforms that looked most vulnerable were actually the most heavily defended. The ones that seemed poorly placed were in perfect positions to create crossfire patterns that would trap enemy ships. The human workers he thought were inefficient were actually trained soldiers in disguise. Colonel Ryan Hughes sat in his command center deep inside Ceres Station, watching the alien ship through sensors that the Zephyrians couldn't detect. Ryan was a patient man who understood that the best lies were built on truth. The mining operations were real, the workers were actually mining, and the ore was being processed and shipped. But every aspect of the operation had been designed to support the deception. Status report, Ryan said to his communications officer. The alien ship is maintaining position at grid reference 7 Alpha 4, the officer replied. They've been there for 6 hours, recording our operations. Their transmission logs show they're preparing another report for their home fleet. Ryan nodded. The aliens were so predictable. They gathered information, analyzed it according to their own assumptions, and then reported what they expected to find. They had been doing this for thousands of years, and they saw no reason to change their methods now. Communications specialist Emma Davis worked her shift in the monitoring station hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Emma had been listening to alien communications for so long that she could almost think like them. She knew their language, their culture, and their military procedures. More importantly, she knew their weaknesses. The latest transmission from the Harmony of Purpose was full of confidence. The aliens were reporting that human defenses were minimal, that human technology was primitive, and that human military organization was chaotic. They recommended that the invasion force should be relatively small, since the humans would collapse quickly under pressure. Emma smiled as she translated the message. The aliens were walking into the trap exactly as planned. Every piece of intelligence they gathered reinforced their belief that humanity was weak and disorganized. They had no idea that human scientists had been studying their technology for 3 years, learning how to counter their weapons and exploit their tactical preferences. Chief Engineer Danny Martinez supervised the construction of another trading outpost on Europa. From the outside, it looked like a simple commercial facility with warehouses, loading docks, and administrative buildings. The alien sensors showed exactly what they were supposed to show, a peaceful civilian installation with no military value, but underneath the surface, Danny's team was building something very different. The warehouses contained missile launchers that could fire through hidden ports in the roof. The loading docks were actually fighter hangar bays with blast doors disguised as cargo doors. The administrative building housed a command center that could coordinate the defense of the entire Jupiter system. How long until we're operational? Danny asked his second-in-command. Another 3 weeks for the main weapon systems, the man replied. The shield generators are already online, but we're keeping them powered down so the aliens don't detect them. The fighter squadrons are ready to deploy on 30 minutes' notice. Danny nodded with satisfaction. Similar installations were being built throughout the solar system. Each one looked innocent and harmless, but together they formed a defensive network that could stop any invasion fleet. The aliens thought they were watching human expansion, but they were actually watching the construction of the largest military. Trapped in galactic history. Captain Nicole Foster continued her regular patrol along the Jupiter-Saturn shipping lane. Her ship, the Peaceful Trader, looked like exactly what its name suggested. The hull was painted in civilian colors, the weapons were hidden behind false panels, and the crew wore merchant uniforms instead of military gear, Nicole maintained her course at exactly the speed limit, following the same route she had taken for months. To alien observers, she was just another routine patrol, boring and predictable. They had no idea that Nicole was actually mapping their sensor positions, testing their response times, and gathering intelligence on their ship capabilities. Contact? Bearing 270, reported her sensor operator. It's our alien friend again. Nicole glanced at her tactical display. The Zephyrian ship was maintaining its usual position, hidden behind a large asteroid, but not hidden enough to escape. Human detection. Same pattern as always? Yes, ma'am. They're recording our movements and transmitting data bursts to their monitoring station every 4 hours. They think we don't know they're there. Nicole smiled. The aliens were so confident in their stealth technology that they never considered the possibility that humans might have better sensors. Every move they made was being recorded, every transmission was being intercepted, and every piece of intelligence they gathered was being carefully controlled. Dr. Kevin Park worked in his laboratory aboard the research station New Horizon, studying the behavioral patterns of their unwelcome guests. Kevin had spent his career studying alien psychology, and the Zephyrians were a fascinating case study in overconfidence. The aliens followed the same procedures. They had used to study hundreds of other species. They assumed that all young civilizations would behave in predictable ways, that all military organizations would follow standard patterns, and that all technology would develop along familiar lines. They had never encountered a species that was deliberately deceiving them. Kevin's analysis showed that the Zephyrians were becoming more confident every day. Their reports to the home fleet were getting bolder, their assessments more dismissive. They talked about human technology as if it were centuries behind their own, about human military strategy as if it were childishly simple. What they didn't understand was that human technology had been specifically designed to appear primitive, while actually being highly advanced. Human military strategy looked simple because it was meant to look simple. The entire solar system had been turned into a stage, and every human was playing a carefully rehearsed role. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams monitored alien communications from her position aboard the stealth reconnaissance ship Shadow Runner. Sarah was a quiet woman with sharp eyes who noticed things that others missed. She had been tracking Zephyrian communication patterns for months, and she could see changes that worried her. The aliens were starting to discuss military matters more frequently. Their messages mentioned fleet movements, weapon deployments, and invasion timelines. The surveillance phase was coming to an end. Soon, the Zephyrians would make their move, and humanity would finally be able to reveal its true strength. New transmission coming in, Sarah reported to her commander. It's from the main monitoring station to the Zephyrian home fleet. They're recommending that the invasion begin within the next few months. The commander nodded grimly. Send word to Earth Command. Tell them the waiting is almost over. The trap was nearly complete. For 3 years, humanity had played the role of a weak and disorganized species. They had allowed themselves to be studied, analyzed, and underestimated. But soon, the Zephyrians would learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who lets you think you're winning right up until the moment you realize you've already lost. The aliens thought they were ready for an easy conquest. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Zephyrian Fleet Admiral Tisara stood in the command center of the massive dreadnought Eternal Victory, studying the holographic display that showed the human solar system in perfect detail. The display was the result of 3 years of careful observation, and it painted a clear picture of human weakness and disorganization. Tisara was an old warrior, even by Zephyrian standards. Her blue skin had darkened with age, and her black eyes held the wisdom of countless battles. She had conquered 17 different species during her long career, and she knew the signs of a civilization ready to fall. The humans showed every one of those signs. Report, she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of absolute power. Science Commander Rethel stepped forward, his younger features bright with excitement. Admiral, our analysis is complete. The human species presents minimal threat to our expansion plans. Their technology is primitive, their military is scattered, and their political system is chaotic. We estimate complete conquest within 2 standard cycles. Tisara nodded slowly. This was what she had expected. Young species always followed the same patterns. They spread out too quickly, built too many small colonies and never developed the unified command structure needed for serious warfare. The humans had made every mistake in the book. Their fleet strength, she asked. Approximately 300 vessels of various classes, Rethel replied. Most are lightly armed patrol ships or cargo vessels. They have perhaps 50 ships that could be considered true warships, but none match our technology. Their largest vessel is less than half the size of our smallest cruiser. What Rethel didn't know was that General Chris Anderson was reading the same intelligence report at that very moment, sitting in his office deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Chris was a big man with gray hair and steady hands who had been planning this deception for 5 years. Every number in the Zephyrian report was exactly what he wanted them to believe. The 300 human vessels were real, but they were only the ships that humanity wanted the aliens to see. Hidden throughout the solar system were another 800 ships, including massive battleships that had been built in secret facilities on the dark side of the moon. The humans had been very careful to make sure their true fleet strength remained invisible to alien sensors. Their defensive positions? Tessara continued. Weak and poorly coordinated, Rethel answered confidently. They have military bases on Earth, Mars, and several moons, but the bases are isolated and cannot support each other. Their defensive satellites are outdated, and their weapon platforms are concentrated around their major population centers. They have left their outer colonies almost completely undefended. Tessara's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped to hear. The humans had made the classic mistake of trying to defend everything and therefore defending nothing effectively. A concentrated attack on their outer colonies would force them to spread their already weak fleet even thinner. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams sat in her hidden observation post on Titan, watching the alien fleet assemble at the edge of human space. Sarah had been tracking their ship movements for weeks, and she could see the patterns forming. The aliens were preparing for a standard conquest operation, the same kind they had used successfully for centuries. The Zephyrian fleet was impressive by most standards. 200 warships, including massive dreadnoughts, fast cruisers, and swarms of fighter craft. Their technology was advanced, their crews were experienced, and their commanders were confident. Under normal circumstances, they would have been unstoppable, but these weren't normal circumstances. The aliens had no idea that human scientists had been studying their technology for 3 years, learning how every system worked and how to defeat it. They had no idea that human engineers had been building weapons specifically designed to counter Zephyrian defenses. Most importantly, they had no idea that the humans knew they were coming. Status report, Sarah said to her communications officer. The alien fleet is at 90% readiness, the officer replied. Long-range sensors show they're preparing for hyperspace jump. Estimated arrival in Sol system within 72 hours. Sarah smiled grimly. After 3 years of patient waiting, the moment was finally approaching. She opened a secure channel to Earth Command. This is Shadowrunner. The aliens are moving. Operation Mousetrap is a go. Dr. Marcus Johnson made final adjustments to the quantum disruption field generators hidden throughout the solar system. Marcus was a thin man with wild hair who had spent his entire career studying theoretical physics. Now his theories were about to be tested in the most important battle in human history. The quantum field generators were Marcus's greatest achievement. They could create localized distortions in space-time that would trap enemy ships, preventing them from using hyperspace drives or long-range communications. The aliens had never encountered such technology because no other species had ever developed it. Field generators are online and ready, Marcus reported to his team. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. We can activate the trap at any time. The generators were disguised as communication relays and navigation beacons, scattered throughout the solar system in what appeared to be random locations. The aliens had been studying these devices for months, never suspecting that they were actually components of a massive weapon system. Admiral Patricia Lewis stood in the war room beneath Cheyenne Mountain, surrounded by holographic displays showing the true extent of human military capability. Patricia was a stern woman with iron-gray hair who had been preparing for this moment her entire career. The displays around her showed a very different picture than what the aliens had been seeing. Hidden fleets waited in the shadows of asteroids and moons. Secret weapons platforms were powered up and ready to fire. Covert installations throughout the solar system were prepared to reveal their true nature. The aliens thought they were attacking a weak and scattered civilization, but they were actually walking into the most sophisticated military trap ever conceived. Fleet status? Patricia asked her operations officer. All units are in position and ready, the officer replied. The 7th Fleet is hidden behind Jupiter, the 3rd Fleet is positioned in the asteroid belt, and the 1st Fleet is waiting in Earth orbit. Total strength, 1,100 ships including 47 battleships. Patricia nodded with satisfaction. For 3 years, humanity had allowed itself to appear weak and disorganized. They had hidden their true strength, concealed their advanced technology, and carefully managed every piece of information the aliens received. The deception had required incredible discipline and coordination, but it had worked perfectly. Captain Tyler Brooks commanded the hidden battlecruiser Retribution, one of the most powerful ships in the human fleet. Tyler was a quiet man with dark eyes who had been waiting for this moment for 2 years. His ship was hidden in the shadow of Europa, invisible to alien sensors but ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Sir, we're receiving final deployment orders, his communications officer reported. Tyler looked at the message on his screen. The aliens were coming, just as predicted. Their fleet was massive and powerful, but they were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. All stations, this is the captain, Tyler announced over the ship's communication system. The waiting is over. In 72 hours, we're going to show these aliens what happens when you try to conquer humanity. Make ready for battle. Throughout the solar system, similar announcements were being made on hundreds of ships. The long deception was almost over. Soon, the Zephyrians would learn that humanity had been playing a much deeper game than they had ever imagined. The aliens thought they were hunting prey, but they were actually walking into the jaws of a trap. That had been 3 years in the making. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The space around the edge of the Sol system rippled like water as the Zephyrian invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 200 alien warships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming in the distant light of the sun. Fleet Admiral Tizara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the human solar system spread out before her like a map she had studied for years. Sensors are detecting the expected human shipping patterns, reported her tactical officer. Multiple vessels are fleeing toward the inner system. Their defensive positions match our intelligence reports exactly. Tizara nodded with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The humans were reacting exactly as predicted, their ships scrambling in panic as they tried to retreat to their heavily defended inner planets. It was a classic defensive maneuver, but it wouldn't save them. The Zephyrian fleet was too powerful, too well coordinated, and too experienced. Begin the advance, she commanded. Standard conquest formation. Target their outer colonies first, then drive toward Earth. This should be over quickly. What Tizara didn't know was that Captain Tyler Brooks was watching her every move from his hidden position behind Europa. Tyler stood on the bridge of the battlecruiser Retribution, studying the alien fleet through sensors that were far more advanced than anything the Zephyrians had ever encountered. They're following exactly the approach vector we predicted, Tyler reported to his crew. All ships are maintaining formation, speed is steady, and they're heading straight for the trap. The alien fleet moved deeper into the solar system, their sensors showing exactly what they expected to see. Human ships were fleeing in disorder, their panicked transmissions filling the communication channels. Mining stations were being abandoned. Trade routes were being cut, and defensive positions were being evacuated. To the Zephyrians, it looked like complete chaos, but the chaos was carefully orchestrated. Every fleeing ship was following a predetermined route. Every abandoned station was being evacuated according to a detailed plan, and every defensive position was being prepared for the real battle that was about to begin. The humans weren't Running away in panic? They were drawing the aliens deeper into the trap. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Zephyrian long-range sensors began detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Science Officer Kethmer stared at his readings in confusion, trying to understand what he was seeing. "Admiral," he called out, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I'm detecting unusual energy patterns throughout the system. The signals are coming from locations that our intelligence reports indicated were civilian installations." Tisara frowned. "Explain." "The mining platforms in the asteroid belt are showing power readings far beyond what should be possible for simple extraction equipment. The trading posts on the outer moons are generating energy signatures that match military-grade weapons systems, and there are dozens of structures that weren't in our previous scans." Before Tisara could respond, the trap began to reveal itself. Throughout the solar system, what had appeared to be simple mining platforms suddenly opened hidden weapon ports. Massive particle beam cannons emerged from concealed positions, their targeting systems locking onto the alien fleet. Trading posts shed their civilian disguises, revealing themselves as heavily armed fortress stations. Commander Rachel Stone sat in her control center deep inside Titan, her fingers hovering over the activation controls for the quantum disruption field. Rachel was a calm woman with steady nerves who had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. Around her, technicians monitored the alien fleet's position with growing excitement. "Enemy fleet is now within optimal range," reported her tactical officer. "All field generators are ready for activation." Rachel smiled grimly. The quantum disruption field was humanity's secret weapon, a technology that the aliens had never encountered and couldn't counter. When activated, it would create a localized bubble in space-time that would trap the entire invasion fleet, cutting them off from their home base and preventing them from escaping. "Activate the field," she commanded. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the solar system, hidden field generators came online, creating a web of quantum distortion that surrounded the alien fleet. The Zephyrians suddenly found themselves trapped in a bubble of twisted space-time, their hyperspace drives useless and their long-range communications cut off. "What's happening?" Tisara demanded as her ship's systems began to malfunction. "Unknown. Energy fields surrounding the fleet," her chief engineer reported. "Hyperspace drives are offline. Communications with the home fleet are being jammed. We're trapped." But the real surprise was still to come. Throughout the solar system, the human fleet began to reveal its true strength. Ship after ship decloaked, emerging from behind asteroids where they had been hiding for months. Fighter squadrons poured out of hidden bases on moons and planets. Massive battleships that had been built in secret facilities powered up their weapon systems. Admiral Patricia Lewis stood in the war room on Earth, watching the battle unfold on her tactical displays. For 3 years, she had been planning this moment, coordinating the greatest military deception in human history. Now it was time to see if all that planning would pay off. "Fleet status?" she asked her operations officer. "All units are revealing themselves on schedule," the officer replied. "The alien fleet is trapped and surrounded. They're detecting our true strength for the first time." Patricia nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrians had been so confident in their intelligence, so sure that they understood human capabilities. They had seen exactly what humanity wanted them to see, and they had based their entire battle plan on incomplete information. On the bridge of the eternal victory, Tisara watched in growing horror as the true extent of human military power revealed itself. The 300 ships she had expected to face had become over 1,000. The weak defensive positions had transformed into a coordinated network of fortresses. The primitive technology had revealed itself to be far more advanced than anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. "How is this possible?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarms that were sounding throughout her ship. Science Officer Kethmer worked frantically at his console, trying to understand what was happening. "Admiral, our intelligence was wrong. Completely wrong. The humans have been deceiving us. Everything we observed, everything we recorded, it was all carefully planned to make us underestimate them." The alien fleet tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Human ships attacked from all directions, their weapon systems specifically designed to counter Zephyrian technology. The aliens had prepared for a quick conquest, but they found themselves trapped in a carefully planned ambush. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the flagship Terra's Wrath, watching the battle unfold around him. Jake had been part of the deception from the beginning, and he felt a deep satisfaction as he watched the aliens realize how thoroughly they had been fooled. "Open a communication channel to the alien fleet," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship. Admiral Tizara stood in the center of the screen, her dark eyes filled with shock and disbelief. She had never experienced anything like this in her long career of conquest. "This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Defense Force," Jake announced, his voice calm and steady. "You have been observing us for 3 years, studying our movements, cataloging our capabilities. What you failed to understand is that we knew you were watching." Tizara's mandibles clicked in disbelief as the human continued. "Every piece of intelligence you gathered, every assessment you made, every strategic decision you based on our supposed limitations, it was all carefully orchestrated. We showed you exactly what we wanted you to see." The alien admiral stared at the screen in stunned silence as the full scope of the deception became clear. The humans had been playing a game that was far more complex than anything the Zephyrians had imagined. They had allowed themselves to be studied and analyzed, all while preparing for this exact moment. "You weren't tracking our expansion," Jake continued. "You were walking into our trap. We weren't moving randomly through space. We were positioning ourselves for this battle. And we weren't unprepared for your arrival. We were waiting for you." The revelation hit the alien fleet like a physical blow. They had been completely outmaneuvered by a species they had considered primitive and disorganized. The hunters had become the hunted, and there was no escape from the trap that had been 3 years in the making. The battle lasted only 4 hours, but it felt like an eternity to the trapped Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Tizara watched from her command chair as her ships were systematically destroyed or disabled by weapons she had never seen before, human. Fighters moved with impossible speed, their pilots seeming to know exactly where her ships would be before they got there. Human battleships fired beams of energy that cut through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. "Damage report," she called out, her voice barely steady. 60% of the fleet is destroyed or disabled," her tactical officer replied. "Weapon systems are failing across all remaining ships. The quantum field is preventing any retreat. We are completely surrounded." Tizara closed her large black eyes and felt the weight of her failure. In her 300 years of military service, she had never experienced anything like this. The humans had not just defeated her fleet. They had made her look like a foolish child playing with toys she didn't understand. Captain Jake Morrison opened another communication channel to the alien flagship. This time, his voice carried no anger, only the calm authority of someone who held all the power. "Admiral Tizara, you have 2 choices. Surrender now, or watch the rest of your fleet be destroyed. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Your ships cannot escape our trap, and your home fleet has no idea what has happened to you." The alien admiral looked at the human on her screen. She had studied the intelligence reports about human military leaders, and they had all described them as emotional, impulsive, and lacking in strategic thinking. The man she was looking at now was none of those things. His eyes were calm and intelligent, and she could see that he had planned for this exact moment. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice bitter with defeat. "Your surrender," Jake replied simply, "and a message to your home fleet. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that humanity is not the weak, primitive species you thought we were. You're going to make sure they understand that any future attacks on human space will meet the same fate." Throughout the solar system, human ships moved to secure the disabled alien vessels. Captain Tyler Brooks led a boarding party onto one of the Zephyrian cruisers, his Marines moving carefully through corridors filled with defeated aliens. Tyler had fought in many battles during his career, but this was different. This wasn't just a military victory. It was proof that human intelligence and patience could overcome any enemy. "Secure all weapons and technology," Tyler ordered his troops. "Treat the prisoners with respect, but make sure they understand that any resistance will be met with force." The Zephyrian crew members they encountered looked at the humans with a mixture of fear and confusion. These weren't the primitive, disorganized beings they had expected to conquer. These were professional soldiers with advanced equipment and careful training. Everything they had been told about humanity was wrong. Dr. Marcus Johnson stood in his laboratory, watching the readings from the quantum disruption field generators. The field was holding perfectly, keeping the alien fleet trapped while allowing human ships to move freely. It was the culmination of 20 years of theoretical work, and it had performed exactly as he had hoped. "Field stability is at 98%, his assistant reported. "The alien ships are completely unable to access hyperspace. Their communication attempts to their home fleet are being blocked successfully." Marcus nodded with satisfaction. The quantum field was more than just a weapon. It was a statement about human scientific capability. The aliens had thought human technology was centuries behind their own, but humanity had developed weapons that the Zephyrians couldn't even understand, let alone counter. Commander Rachel Stone coordinated the cleanup operations from her control center on Titan. The battle was over, but there was still work to be done. Alien survivors needed to be rescued, damaged ships needed to be secured, and intelligence needed to be gathered. Most importantly, the message needed to be sent to the Zephyrian home fleet. "Status of the alien command ship?" she asked her communications officer. "Minimal damage, crew is cooperative," the officer replied. "Admiral Tuzara has agreed to record a message for transmission to her home fleet. She seems to understand the situation completely," Rachel smiled grimly. The alien admiral was a professional soldier, and she knew when she had been beaten. More importantly, she understood that her defeat was so complete that any attempt at revenge would be suicidal. Admiral Patricia Lewis stood in the war room on Earth, surrounded by her staff officers and watching the final stages of the operation. The battle had gone exactly according to plan, but she knew that the real work was just beginning. Humanity had revealed its true strength, and that would change everything about how they were viewed in the galaxy. "Casualty report?" she asked. "Minimal. Losses on our side," her chief of staff replied. 14 ships damaged, none destroyed. Total personnel casualties are less than 200. The aliens lost 120 ships, with approximately 50,000 casualties. Patricia nodded. The human victory had been so complete that it was almost embarrassing. 3 years of careful planning and deception had paid off beyond their wildest hopes. The aliens had walked into a trap so perfectly designed that they never had a chance. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Williams worked with a team of translators to help Admiral Tisara prepare her message to the Zephyrian home fleet. Sarah had been studying alien psychology for years, and she knew exactly what needed to be said to prevent future attacks. "Tell them about our true fleet strength," Sarah instructed the alien admiral. "Tell them about our technology. Tell them about how completely we fooled your intelligence operations. Most importantly, tell them that any future aggression against humanity will result in the same fate that befell your fleet." Tisara looked at the young human woman with something that might have been respect. "You planned this for years, didn't you? Every detail, every piece of intelligence we gathered, it was all part of your trap." Sarah nodded. 3 years of planning, 3 years of careful deception, 3 years of making you see exactly what we wanted you to see. We knew you would come eventually, and we wanted to make sure that when you did, you would never want to come back. The message that Admiral Tisara sent to her home fleet was simple and direct. She explained that the human solar system was defended by a fleet of over 1,000 ships, equipped with technology that was far more advanced than anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. She described the quantum trap that had made escape impossible, the weapons that had cut through their best defenses, and the tactical brilliance that had made their defeat inevitable. Most importantly, She told them that humanity had been deliberately deceiving them for years, showing them exactly what they wanted them to see while preparing for the inevitable conflict. The humans hadn't been expanding randomly through space. They had been building the most sophisticated military trap in galactic history. The response from the Zephyrian home fleet came 3 days later. It was short and to the point. All Zephyrian forces would withdraw from human space immediately, and the Sol system would be marked as a restricted area. Any future contact with humanity would be conducted through diplomatic channels only. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the stars and thinking about what had been accomplished. Humanity had fought its first interstellar war and won it decisively, but more importantly, they had won it in a way that sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humans were not to be underestimated, not to be taken lightly, and definitely not to be conquered. The alien prisoners were loaded onto transport ships and sent back to their home territory with a simple message: spread the word about what happened in the Sol system. Tell every species in the galaxy that humanity is not a primitive civilization waiting to be conquered. Tell them that humans are patient, intelligent, and very, very dangerous when threatened. Years later, as humanity expanded into the galaxy as equals rather than subjects, the story of the Zephyrian deception became legendary. It was taught in military academies as an example of how patience and careful planning could overcome seemingly impossible odds. It was studied by diplomats as proof that sometimes the best way to avoid war is to be so thoroughly prepared for it that your enemies never dare to start one. The phrase, "we weren't moving, we were waiting," became the unofficial motto of the Terran Defense Force. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon in any conflict is not technology or numbers, but the enemy's own assumptions about your capabilities. Humanity had learned a valuable lesson about the galaxy they were entering. There were older, more powerful species out there, species that viewed younger civilizations as nothing more than obstacles to be removed. But humanity had also taught the galaxy a lesson in return. They had shown that patience, intelligence, and careful planning could defeat any enemy. No matter how powerful or experienced, the waiting game was over, and humanity had won.